SportsRap radio show is the group page. We are back. And like I announced in the beginning, the intro, the NBA on Friday has announced that they will be, Chuck, what's going on, big fella? They will be reopening facilities, practice facilities for players in the cities where the stay away, stay home, not stay away, the stay home orders have been lessened or eased up or released. Let's see. They say that players can return to team facilities in Georgia for individual workouts as soon as next week. The teams will be prohibited from holding group workouts or organized team workouts. They said that the NBA's decision to reopen facilities based on the loosening of local governmental policies isn't reflective of a new timetable for a resumption of play. So it's not telling us that they're going to be on schedule to play games when the next season would start. They're not saying that. They're just saying that they're loosening up and letting these players get in individually and get some workouts in. So again, that's still a possibility, depending on how many players are still in the cities where they play. A lot of them have probably or have gone home. So if they can get travel to work out in those facilities, that would be great. But then again, a lot of the guys have facilities in or around their homes to make it easy for them to stay in shape and do workout. So my guy Chuck, what do you think about my beloved Broncos drafting wide receiver Jerry Jeudy? So to answer that question, Chuck, and I thank you for chiming in with another question. So that shows me that people are tuned in and chiming in. So Chuck, I think that was a good pick for you guys as far as the receiver. I think it was a position of need, but the question now becomes, what's going on with your quarterback situation? You got a good receiver in Judy. I agree with that. Like I said, I think it was a good pick. But his play and his progression is all going to be dependent on Ivan Robinson. Thanks for tuning in. It's all going to be dependent on what you guys do to shore up or fix up that quarterback situation. So again, yes, I think that was a good pick, Jerry Jeudy, for you guys. Like I said, address the position of need, but you got to work on that quarterback and get that quarterback situation in order. So moving on to more news, as we know and I announced last week, the XFL has had shut down and filed for bankruptcy. Now they filed for bankruptcy. So I said that they had shut down and they had just ceased all operations, but now it's been reported that they have actually filed for bankruptcy. Let's see. Chuck chimes back in and says Drew Lock looks good. He'll get a chance to grow with his young wide receivers. Oh, that's a good thing. Like I said, I'm not knocking you guys. I just think that it has to be something set in place, either a legit ownership for Drew Lock to be the starter, or it has to be a legit, solid, and very in-depth competition at quarterback. So, I mean, it's always a great thing when you got quarterback and wide receiver tandems that can grow together. It just helps them out in the long run. So hopefully you guys can get back, and that'll be a good thing for you, the Denver Broncos. So yeah, the XFL, was shut down due to the COVID-19. It was as were all the other major sports in and around. So, but they were just ceased, because they were still making, I guess, trying to um, pay staff. But there has been some difficulties. So again, they have filed for bankruptcy, which means their future is very, very much in limbo. There's also been a case filed in court against Vince McMahon, the founder and chief executive officer of the XFL, by the commissioner Andrew Luck, who levied his claim. There also will be filings that they will be that the XFL will begin liquidating assets and stakeholders, and it also leaves coaches like Bob Stoops, June Jones, Jim Zorn, and Mark Trestman with millions of dollars in unpaid contracts who are now going to be left in limbo and don't know if they will get they don't know if they will get paid in full or paid at all. Yeah, Chuck, we did do a good thing. We got Will Parks from y'all, so we appreciate that for you. We needed help in that defensive backfield, and he wanted to come home. So local guy makes good, comes home. Unfortunately, you had to lose him. So we thank you and we appreciate you letting us use the services of one Will Parks. Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Denver Broncos. So last night we had episodes week two, episodes 3 and 4 of we got something. We got another safety, Chuck. We definitely need cornerbacks back. We picked up Darius Slay. We picked up Will Parks, who is a safety, by the way. But we got a couple cornerbacks in the draft. We picked up another safety in the draft. So maybe they might be thinking about converting one of those safeties or one of those cornerbacks or somebody that can produce. So, yeah, you're right. We still need help at the quarterback, and we need a running back, too. So we'll see what happens in camp, if camp ever gets started or whatever happens progressing on in free agency. So, again, yeah, Slay is good. That was a very, very good pickup for us. So he can lock down one side of the field. Now we just got to work on the other side. Yeah, thanks, Chuck. I appreciate that. Episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance. Very, very interesting. Very intriguing. These 2 episodes were where we get the Dennis Rodman pulling into this team. And, one of the things, if you haven't seen any episodes, we had premiere 1 and 2 last week, and then yesterday we had episodes 3 and 4. One of the things I like the way that this documentary was put together is when they introduce certain segments that they want to talk about, and this is all centered around that 97-98 season, their 6th and final championship season with this team. That's why they called it The Last Dance. But I like the fact that they put trivia and other facts in between when they go to commercial breaks and things of that nature, which I think is good. I think it's great for basketball fans who have not had any live basketball for so long. I also like the fact that when they're introducing the parts, the way they broke it down for the parts of conversation or the parts of it they put in the documentary, that they give you history from particular players from way back when. Like they went to Michael Jordan starting off in episode 1. They went all the way back to him in high school and in college. The same thing with Scotty in episode 2. So in episode 3 and 4, they did the same thing with Dennis Rodman. Before they actually showed you how he was brought into the fold, they went back and showed you a history. And they even showed you he was drafted by the Pistons, how he played against these guys and progressed, and so on and so on and so forth. So again, we're going to do the finer points of the episodes as we progress through this 5-week series. So working on episodes 3 and 4, the first pick was Dennis Rodman was wild. So we all know Dennis Rodman. We all know how Dennis Rodman progressed in the league. We all know when Dennis Rodman came into the league. You knew very little about him. I mean, people won't believe it, but if you paid attention last night, he said that he only knew one way to play, full speed. So he was a scorer in high school and in college. In high school and college, he was a scorer because he didn't know any other way to play. Once he got to the pros, he even said this himself too, he realized the things that he was good at. So he focused on honing those skills, the defense and the rebound. That's what got him paid. That's what got him championships. That's what kept him in the NBA for as long as it did. So he was one, and listening to the commentary from Michael Jordan and from Scottie Pippen and from Phil Jackson, when you see Dennis Rodman in his element, in him playing basketball, not his element, in his era of playing basketball, and how he progressed into the things that he did. And we all know it was a little strange for us at best. But you begin to see and you listen to these guys talk, you understand how smart this man really was. Like I said, he got into the NBA and he realized that he had a niche and he worked and honed that niche. And his niche was defensive and rebounding. And that's what he did. So later on in his career, we all know the hair colors and the different wild things and all of that, but he was definitely wild. But one of the things that I've always said about Dennis Rodman is if I was building a team and I had to take my pick of the litter, Dennis Rodman would definitely be one of the picks on my team for what he does on the basketball court. He's a winner. He's not a quitter. He gives you 110, if not more, percent effort when he's out on the court. Uh, his teammates, they were at some point, and they kind of mentioned this every so often throughout the documentary, that they were the three amigos. Uh, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen knew that they needed rebounding. They needed somebody who can get under somebody's skin on the defensive end to progress further than what they were. And I like the fact also in episodes 3 and 4 how they went back to 89, 87 when they couldn't get past the Detroit Pistons for a while. And at that time, Dennis Rodman was with Detroit Pistons for some of those years. When that was when the Detroit Pistons were the bad boys. Hence, they earned that name, as you saw if you were around to see those games live, and then you saw it in the documentary last night, that they were rough and tough, knock you down. And we all know the game has changed now considerably, but back then, it was a lot rougher. And Dennis Rodman was part of what the Bulls needed to eventually get past the Detroit Pistons and move along. Um, the shot with an assist from Lenny Wilkins. You know what shot that was. They couldn't beat Cleveland. Cleveland had beat them 6 times in a row. And that shot on Craig Elo, the jumper from Michael. And I'm going to break this down for you a little bit. They had, and I quote, they had Craig Elo on me, which honestly was a mistake, Jordan said. And then I quote again, because the guy that played me better was Ron Harper. Okay? Ron Harper, for this part, wasn't happy about this segment either. Okay, so he says, we're up by 1. I said, time out, coach. I got MJ. Harper recounted. Quote, so the coach tells me I'm going to put Elo on MJ. And I'm like, yeah, okay, what the F? It's bull crap. Y'all know what happened after that. What they say was also interesting at that point or during that game was Jordan reminding us that in those days, teams played division opponents 6 times in the regular season. And again, like I just mentioned, the Bulls were 0-6 against Cleveland for that season before they met in the playoffs. Everyone had picked the Cavs to win, and Jordan, famously motivated by every slight ever thrown his way, made sure to call out the writers who predicted a Cleveland victory, both in his post-game interview and interview at the time, and even looking back some 30 years later. He is a champion grudge holder. The next topic, Jordan rules weren't that complicated. Okay, it says, you would think that a defensive strategy that inspired an entire book to be written would be, somewhat different than your average defensive approach. It really wasn't. As Brendan Malone, the former Pistons coach, said, he said the Jordan rules were as follows, and I quote, on the wings, we were going to push Jordan to the elbow. We're not going to let him drive to the baseline. Number 2, when he was on top, we were going to influence him to his left. When he got the ball in the low post, we were going to trap him from the top. That's the Jordan rules, and it was that simple. Chuck, what's up, cuzzo? What's going on? End quote. Sorry about that, end quote. Now, in other words, famous defensive strategy from a basketball standpoint basically consisted of pushing a great scorer to his weak hand and or in the direction of help and double teaming him in the post. Not exactly revelations. What happens when Jordan does make it to the basket? It's when Lambert and Rick Mahorn would go up and knock him down to the ground, end quote, Malone said. So, listening to what Brendan Malone said, initially, the Jordan rules were basically what you would do to anybody that was the alpha male on the opposing team or the player on the opposing team that was having his way with you on the basketball court. You want to push him to your help. You angle him to his weak hand, yada, yada, yada. Basic, fundamental basketball coaching. It's what you do. But then he was asked, what do you do when he drives to the basket? And he drives to the basket, back at that time, you can knock guys to the ground. And it takes a toll. Dennis Rodman also said during this time, one of the things that impressed him about Michael Jordan was he could never understand or come to grips how he could take so much and come back with the same fire and wanting to beat these guys that he did. Next up, Jordan's career comes full triumph. Okay. Doug Collins was hired in 86, and Jordan called him a breath of fresh air. The nuances, yada, yada, yada. And he was loving it because a lot of Doug's plans were get the ball to Michael Jordan. And everybody else get the out of the way. It wasn't the worst strategy, but it wasn't getting the Bulls past the Pistons is what the problem was. Okay. After that, Jordan entered Phil Jackson, who was hired to replace Collins after the Bulls just made it to the conference finals prior to the 89-90 season. Jackson didn't believe in handing Jordan unilateral control of the offense, and Jordan was initially skeptical. He said he wasn't a Phil Jackson fan when he first came because he was coming in to take the ball out of his hands, Jordan said. We move on, and they get into this triangle offense, a more egalitarian system, which increased options that favored more ball movement and empowered role players. Pippen evolved into the first true point forwards inside the new scheme, and Jordan, though reluctant at first, found life to be a lot easier when the defense couldn't just focus on him. So there you have it. Michael Jordan wasn't happy initially because things were going to change. The ball was going to be taken out of his hands, so to speak. But as he progressed and understood and got into the offense, he understood and he realized that it was a lot easier for him. Number 5, Jordan still hates Isaiah and the Pistons. We all know the stories about the Pistons and Isaiah. And around that time as well, we were also leading into the Dream Team selection. And we all know the story behind the Dream Team with Michael Jordan and Isaiah Thomas and how that all played out. So we're not going to get into detail about that. So, they had their times, when they started the Bad Boys and the Jordan Rules. And, one of the things that Michael Jordan has said about this fight is, and I quote, "I know it's bull." Jordan said before he grabbed the iPad, whatever he says now. It wasn't true, his actions then. He had time enough to think about it or the reaction of the public that's changed his perspective. So Mike isn't really feeling the way Isaiah has changed his perspective right now. Again, and I quote, "All you have to do is go back to us losing in Game 7 the previous year. I shook everybody's hand 2 years in a row. We shook their hands when they beat us. There's a certain respect to the game that we paid to them. That's sportsmanship. No matter how much it hurts, and believe me, it effing hurt. But we didn't have to shake their hands. We knew we whooped their ass already. We got past them, and to me, that was better in some ways than winning a championship." And I end quote. So for the record, Thomas admitted way back in 91, just a few months before the incident happened, that walking off the court without shaking hands with the Bulls was the wrong thing to do, unsportsmanlike. So that was a problem. Michael Jordan and the Bulls thought that there was some type of respect to be had within the game. And with them not shaking hands, they felt disrespected, yada, yada, yada. And thus we had that whole story. Number 6, Michael Best's magic proves he's human. Well, Jordan details his desire. He faced some reference to Magic and Larry Bird. Magic and Larry Bird. Jordan was seen as a great talent, a great scorer, a great athlete, but not necessarily a guy who made his team better. Ultimately carried franchises to championships. Think modern day Russell Westbrook. I can't agree with that because I am one who said that until the trade, and I don't think it's going to happen, before the trade, I said that Russell Wilson and OKC, they would not win a championship with him there, with him as their leader. He's now been traded, and I don't think that him and James Harden will win a championship together. Once they were together in OKC, they played for a championship. Now they're together again in Houston. I still don't think that they will win a championship. So Jordan beats Magic, and that was extremely special for him. And what he really found fascinating was the fact that how shocked they were to see the emotion Jordan showed when he was famously crying while hugging the Larry O'Brien trophy doused in champagne. Says, quote, he's jumping in the air and he's all excited on the court. That's who we knew. The competitive Michael Jordan. The win at all costs Michael Jordan. Which was said by, and I end quote, which was said by former center Will Perdue. And he goes on, he says, sometimes we question whether he was human, whether he had feelings. The only emotion we'd ever seen out of him was frustration or anger. We were literally stunned to see those emotions with the trophy, end quote. So that shows you the competitive nature that Michael Jordan had, the trueness and the respect for the game that he had. And he was determined to be the best, and ultimately he became the best, hence we call him the GOAT. And there's always going to be comparisons because people need sports debates and sports topics. But I am one on the side of MJ being the GOAT. And that's just where I'm at. Like I said, I'm kind of leading into the LeBron James comparisons, which that is a whole different show, a whole different bag of worms that we can get into. But episodes 3 and 4 brought into perspective how the three amigos came together, how they gave up and sacrificed their own personal feelings to win basketball games and win championships. At one point where Dennis Rodman was the number 2 when Scotty was not playing, and then Scotty returns and now he's pushed back to being the number 3. It changed things a little bit for Dennis. He went to Phil and he said he needed a break, he needed a vacation, yada, yada, yada. He ultimately got a 48-hour vacation. But as we know, at that particular moment, things were wearing on Dennis. And they had to go literally get him out of bed and bring him into practice so that they can continue the season. But it took enough. That meant that they cared enough and they respected enough to go and get him. It was Michael Jordan that went to the door, hotel room, and got him and helped get him out of bed and bring him to practice. So it was an understanding and a respect factor. The understanding part of it was they knew they needed him, part of that unit, to be successful and win. The respect was they let him go and told him that he needed to be back in a certain amount of time, in which they stated that he was not back on time. So they went and got him. And that was their respect. They cared enough about him to go and get him. And so with that being said, again, you can probably watch these on demand on ESPN again tonight, episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance. We've got 3 more weeks, to finish it out. And it's, like I said, it's very interesting and very intriguing how they're leaving cliffhangers at the end of episodes, and how they're putting facts and things, and how they're giving you full history of key points that they want to discuss and bring out about this year and this run. So, with that being said, folks, I will wrap up right now. A little early. It's 20 minutes past the noontime hour. I thank everyone who tuned in, everyone that chimed in. You know where to find me as always. SportsRap Radio Show, the group page on Facebook, at SportsRap_D on Instagram and Twitter. The webpage is sportsrapradio.com, and the podcast on iHeartRadio and wherever else you get your podcast, the Sports Rap Podcast, YouTube, Sports Rap TV. So I'm all over. You know where to find me. Also, go over to the group page. I just posted an article about the topic of Ben Simmons and his shooting. It's a very, very interesting article. If you don't get over to my page and see it, you can go to ESPN. Julie McMullen wrote the article, and it talks about Ben Simmons, not shooting the ball. And it also goes into some detail, and it has some commentary from his college coach, who tells you how he would have handled some things, and some comments and some things come out about Ben Simmons and how he feels his coach, or how he feels he should be coached. So it's a very interesting article. Check that out. I will see you next week and all week on social media. It's your boy D signing out. Heat 100 Radio, Sports Rap Radio Show. See you next week, all week on social media. Stay safe on purpose, and we will see you next week.